There's a real chance the St. Louis Cardinals just landed the best player in the 2024 MLB Draft with the 7th overall pick. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Sunday evening, July 14th, 2024. First round of the MLB Draft was an interesting one for the Cardinals this year because they were drafting inside the top 10 for the first time in a long time. Highest pick the Cardinals had at number 7 overall since they took J.D. Drew at number 5 overall back in 1998. And I think in the aftermath of the pick being submitted, it went about as well as this evening could have for the St. Louis Cardinals. So on tonight's episode of the podcast, we will talk about their selection of infielder JJ Wetherholt out of West Virginia, 7th overall, how the pick came to be, how we should feel about it, and what do we know at this point about the newest member of the Cardinals organization, and why I'm willing to make some of the bold claims about this player that I did off the top of the show tonight. There's some reason behind it, some logic behind what I'm saying, and I'll give you a player comp. I know Randy Flores, Cardinal scouting director, tends to not like to touch that question. Frank Cusimano asked it tonight on the Zoom if he would deliver a player comp for the newest Cardinal, and Flores went to his answer that he always uses this time of year when he's asked that question. He said his hope is that someday you'll have draft prospects comparing themselves to JJ Wetherholt. That's what the Cardinals are hoping, that they've struck gold with this player and that he'll end up being a longtime member of the club. But since I have no reason not to, I will give you a name that I think is comparable, and I'll explain why I'm willing to make the comparison of JJ Wetherholt to this player that you're going to be familiar with, Cardinals fans. So trust me, you want to stick around for that and for all the conversation as we break down the Cardinals' first-round pick from Sunday evening. If you're a Cardinals fan, you're going to want to subscribe to this YouTube channel, first and foremost. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button. We cover the St. Louis Cardinals on a daily basis throughout the season, and it's going to be the same throughout the offseason. I know you might not believe me yet, but when I started doing daily episodes and videos on March 28th, making sure to post to this YouTube channel 7 days a week, that's something that I have been able to maintain so far this season, and I plan in the offseason to basically keep up a pretty torrid pace as well. So if you like Cardinals content, this is the place that you want to be because we cover all the angles, and now tonight the draft is one of those angles. Normally we're covering the day-to-day and talking about what happens in the Cardinals games. I'm going to be honest with you. I think nobody's going to have an issue if tonight I don't even talk about the game at all. Cardinals lose 8-3 to the Cubs. Miles Michaelis gave up a bunch of homers. The bullpen gave up some more homers. It was an absolute mess. And it was also the last game of the first half, quote-unquote half, even though we're way more than one half of the way into the season. But the All-Star break is this week. You're going to want to just forget about that game on Sunday. So I'm literally not even going to talk about it. We're going to focus on JJ Wetherholt and the Cardinals' selection of him out of West Virginia at number 7 overall. And we'll talk some down on the farm as well because the minor league affiliates are still playing, and we want to get to hear me moo like a cow when I play that down on the farm drop. So that's what you're in for in tonight's episode of B-Schaeff Daily. Appreciate you guys joining me, and appreciate those who have joined in on the channel membership on YouTube. YouTube's been a little bit squirrely with the revenue the last few days, but they figured it out, and they're finally getting the glitches done. But as I checked my YouTube app this afternoon, I noticed something. My buddy Trevor has become the most recent member of the B-Schaeff Daily gang, joining the channel membership here on YouTube. Salvador and Brian recently doing so. Craig joined the B-Schaeff Daily Lounge a couple of days ago, as did Ken. He upgraded his subscription from the gang to the lounge, and the difference there is you get to be in a private group chat with me on the very brand new Discord that we put together for Cardinals fans, which is now up to 172 members. I'm going to link the Discord in the description to this video. If you want to join the Discord, it's free, and oh my gosh, the game threads are fantastic. The daily discussions with other Cardinals fans has been unbelievable, and I've only been doing this for like 3-4 days. It's been awesome to see. Get yourself in the Discord. Like I said, the link for the Discord, it'll be bright and clear at the very top of the video description here, and that's the free version. If you want to join the lounge, sign up for the YouTube membership, and you can do that. You can also subscribe to B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We are having a blast with the podcast this year, and the support has been unbelievable. But you don't want to hear about Miles Michaelis giving up a bunch of home runs. You don't want to hear about the Cardinals losing to the Cubs to split the series. You want to hear about JJ Wetherholt, so that's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. Many publications as recently as today had JJ Wetherholt potentially going 1.1. They had this guy maybe as the 101 to the Cleveland Guardians. partially thinking because of him coming off of a hamstring injury, and we're going to talk about that. I think that's the reason, in part, that he ends up falling to number 7 overall to the Cardinals for them to be able to scoop him up. But he has the pedigree of a guy that could have gone 101 in this draft. He's an infielder out of West Virginia, hails originally from the Pittsburgh area, played 3 seasons with the Mountaineers at West Virginia as an infielder, mostly second base, but this year played shortstop as well and showed the ability to handle that position. We'll talk about why that is a pretty encouraging sign for anybody that you're trying to integrate into professional baseball. You like to see that the guy can handle the shortstop position, even if eventually the Cardinals aren't going to need him there, because guess what? The Cardinals do have a shortstop. I want to make it very clear off the top. Mason Wynn is the Cardinals shortstop for now and into the future. JJ Wetherholt has the bat to be able to get to the big league level and play somewhere else, right? It doesn't have to be supplanting Mason Wynn. We need to make sure that we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves, comparing a move a team might make in an amateur draft to something going on at the big league level in 2024. Those two things are worlds apart, and one does not have the influence on the other in quite the same way that you see in every other sport. The NFL, NBA, it's different when it comes to baseball in the draft. So don't be the commenter that's saying, why they have Mason Wynn? Why'd they draft this guy who was a shortstop at West Virginia? I'm going to explain everything, but I want to start at the top where, like, literally Alex on Twitter sent me this after the pick, said the last mock draft on MLB.com was listed as multiple analysts predicting JJ Wetherholt to go to the Cleveland Guardians at 101. Reading from that explanation, the Guardians' strategy appears to be maximizing the value of their entire draft class. Wetherholt is the top talent who would accept the largest signing bonus discount. That was the consideration as to why maybe people thought the Guardians, not that he's not worthy of being the number 1, but because of the way the draft works in baseball. It's not like other sports. The NFL, you have your slot value, and that's what you're getting paid. It's kind of predetermined by the CBA. In baseball, teams take their entire allotment of money they can spend during the full draft, and they can allocate it as they see fit. So part of the decision-making process in who you draft is who you're pretty sure you can sign, and sometimes sign for less than maybe you would normally expect to have to pay a player in that draft position, whether you're drafted number 1 overall or where the Cardinals were at number 7, and you have to sort of anticipate some of those things and know the person in the situation. Is it a guy who could go back to college? Later on in the draft, those decisions become a lot more relevant as you try to kind of navigate those waters. Sometimes it might be a high school kid, but you know he's committed to go to college. How dead set is he on going to college and honoring that commitment versus maybe he'll sign if you up his bonus? And so in the later rounds, you might be able to go aggressive and draft a high school kid that everybody expects to go to college. But if you are able to save some money on the front end in those first couple of rounds, which the Cardinals don't have a second-round pick this year because of the Sonny Gray addition in the offseason. But my point with that is there are other factors that play, so I want to be totally transparent about that. But if multiple people are saying, yeah, J.J. Wetherholt could go to the Guardians, I mean, the Cardinals got a good one, right? If this guy had buzz, and there was legitimate buzz that he could go number 1 overall, for him to come to and fall to number 7 to the Cardinals feels like a gift, right? It feels like he fell right into their lap, and it is for that reason that I think tonight went just about as well as the Cardinals could have hoped with getting J.J. Wetherholt in the circumstances that they did. You look at the way that this pick ended up unfolding and the draft board ended up unfolding, you see Chase Burns go number 2 overall to the Reds is kind of where things started to go, I wouldn't say haywire, but you start to see that board materialize in maybe a way that you weren't sure it would. The Bazana goes number 1 overall to the Guardians, and then a pitcher off the board at number 2. Cincinnati takes the leap for Wake Forest's Chase Burns. I think he was rather consensus to be the number 1 pitcher in the draft, but some people might have thought Hagen Smith. Well, Hagen Smith goes to the White Sox at 5. So 2 starting pitchers in the first 5 picks. One's a righty, one's a lefty. Hagen Smith out of Arkansas. He goes to the White Sox. And it makes sense for the White Sox, right? They might be trading 40% of their starting rotation within the next couple of weeks. And a lot of times, I know I just talked about, hey, don't think that J.J. Wetherholt has anything to do with Mason Wynn, because he doesn't. But there are teams who might look at it that way and say, hey, we've got a chance to get an elite what is considered to be an elite arm, and where the Chicago White Sox, and also trying to rebuild this thing as fast as possible because they're a terrible team right now, and maybe that's organization deep and they're not going to be able to fix it, but the people that are running the team at that point are going to try. But if they plan to be trading Garrett Crochet and Eric Fetty, they're going to have openings in their rotation. And that's why I suggested the trade earlier this week where maybe you give a Zach Thompson for a John Brebbia, because Zach Thompson in the Cardinal organization, I know he's a former first-rounder, but right now I'm not sure what the role is going to end up being. And if you have a vision for what a guy like John Brebbia could be for this team that's trying to go as deep as it can into October, I'm not just going to poo-poo that idea, even though the years of control ratio would be ridiculously lopsided if you made that trade. But I like to make the comparison. If I signed with the Cardinals tomorrow, I would technically have 6 years of team control once I'm called up to the big leagues. That doesn't mean I would have any trade value. And that's extremely hyperbolic because Zach Thompson is a bajillion times the baseball player I'll ever be. But there is that cap of, at some point, is he going to have value at the big league level to the Cardinals? If not, then the years of control is kind of a moot point. You can control something for as many years as you want to, but if that thing does not have value to you, and these guys are players, not things, but you do have to think of it in terms of asset management. And so that's a little bit of a tangent, but that's why I am so willing sometimes to talk about, all right, Dylan Carlson, yeah, he's got years of control, but if I could flip that for Tommy Pham, who I think could serve a role on this year's team that could potentially get you to October and maybe a little bit deeper because of what he does against left-handed pitching, then I'm not totally unwilling to think about that. I would have to at least consider it. Now, the Cardinals might be out of the Tommy Pham business entirely, and there's a lot in the fan base, folks in the fan base that would say that's good. They don't want anything to do with Tommy Pham or his personality or his way of doing the world. But I personally think it would be fine. The Cardinals, maybe they don't. And so I don't think you'll probably see Tommy Pham, right? But that's why I bring up these certain things, because when we do these trade talks and we do trade polls and we talk about this stuff, there's a human element to it that we don't always know behind closed doors how the Cardinals are going to necessarily treat certain situations beyond what you can see on the stat card. So that's my little tangent, but what led me to it was talking about the fact that 2 starting pitchers went in the top 5 picks tonight, with the Reds at number 2 taking Chase Burns and the White Sox going Hagen Smith at number 5. So those are 2 guys who aren't JJ Wetherholt, right? Like, you could be the top overall position player prospect, and you could have this hamstring thing come up, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that has all entailed for Wetherholt and what the Cardinals should be able to expect about it. But in the case of the Guardians, I think if they didn't take him, you could start to see the wheels turning for Wetherholt to potentially drop to the Cardinals. And they took Travis Bazzana out of Oregon State, the second number 1 overall pick from Oregon State within the last handful of years. Adley Rutschman, of course, the other one for the Baltimore Orioles. And I'm going to talk about the Orioles a little bit later on as well. I don't know how this team doesn't win the World Series this year. And it's going to be in the Down on the Farm segment that I bring it up. And when I get there, I think you'll understand where I'm coming from with it. But my goodness, do they have a deep farm system to be able to potentially make really any move that they could possibly want to bolster this year's team and really go for it. That organization is a well-oiled machine at this point in time. And it's not that long ago that it was the laughingstock of Major League Baseball. So you get some smart people in charge and things can really turn around for you, is honestly the bottom line there. But nevertheless, when they make the Bazzana decision at 1 and 2 pitchers go at 2 and 5 respectively, what it then took was, I think, Nick Kurtz going to Oakland when he did. I think that was the number 4 overall pick, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that really allows for the Wetherholt thing to come into focus, because Nick Kurtz is a big burly boy, hits home runs, first baseman type. And then Jack Caglione, the Florida Gator, goes to the Royals at 6, and suddenly the Cardinals are on the clock, and nobody has selected JJ Wetherholt. And I think the Cardinals were probably giddy when that came to be. I think the only guy we knew for sure was going to be top 2 or 3 was Charlie Condon out of Georgia, and the outfielder falls to number 3 to the Rockies after the Reds went Chase Burns. We probably knew Bazzana was going to be top 3 as well. But then from there, it was, okay, what are the Reds going to want to do? If they want to go hitter, you could see Wetherholt being in play. Kurtz obviously ends up going maybe a little higher than you expected. Caglione was highly considered, and so maybe he would have been a guy that you would have thought top 5, but he falls to the Royals at 6. I think they're probably thrilled to get the pure slugger out of out of Florida at that pick. But as things kind of unfold, you knew you were high enough to get somebody really, really good, right? But I think maybe the lesser case scenario than what played out for the Cardinals would have been had the Athletics taken Wetherholt at 4 instead of Nick Kurtz, because I'm not sure the level of interest the Cardinals would have had in Kurtz out of Wake Forest. And, Christian Moore ended up going 8th to the Angels, good player. But then you see a high school shortstop go to the Pirates at 9, and the Cardinals weren't going to go that route. Bryce Rainier, however you say his name, out of Harvard Westlake, Jack Flaherty's high school. He goes at 11 to the Tigers. Like, the Cardinals weren't going to, I don't think they were going to go the prep route. They wanted to get somebody that you could see impact the team within the next 2-3 years, I think was the goal. So a college position player or a college arm, and the two realistic college arms that would have been considered that early end up being off the board before the Cardinals get to pick. So there's really no temptation there. I mean, temptation, they would have been happy to get either of them. You don't have to cater the draft, and you probably shouldn't. You should take the best player available. You don't have to cater the draft, though, is what I'm saying, to what your big league roster has or needs right now. Because for as much as you might think a guy is major league ready or is going to be the next Paul Skeens or is going to be a quick riser through the system, you can't know for sure. And you're still, even a quick riser through the system might take a couple of years to get up. So you don't want to necessarily cater to what you have right now. It's not like the NFL. You need a quarterback, you draft one, and you start him that year. It's different in baseball, and I think we as baseball fans understand that. But the Cardinals, all of that being said, would have, I think, loved to have gotten like a Higgins-Smith. I think that would have been great for them. But when that doesn't happen, you just can pivot to a different direction and know that JJ Wetherholt is extremely, extremely high on the Cardinals board, as well as Randy Flores illustrated later on tonight when he did a Zoom with the local media. And there was not another pitcher taken until number 15 overall, and I'm not even going to begin to try to pronounce the young man's name. I believe his first name is Gerangelo, and then the last name, I really am not even going to try. It begins with a C. There's a couple of J's in it. It feels like it'd be very good in Scrabble, but I don't even know where to begin with it, and I've never heard it spoken, so I'm going to move on. The thing that I was going to say about him, though, is he's amphibious. He pitches with his left arm and his right arm, and was drafted as a first-round pick. So he's somebody that might end up continuing to do that out of Mississippi State. We'll be able to see what the Mariners are able to do with him. But my point was, when it comes to drafting at number 7 and you would maybe have eyes on a pitcher, I think once those two pitchers were gone, you were going the position player route, and you knew it wasn't going to be a prep guy. So Wetherholt is perfect. Like, he's perfect for what the Cardinals, I think, would have organizationally been looking to do. And so that it plays out the way that it does ends up being really favorable for the Cardinals. I think because I think this kid is a good player. You look at his numbers at West Virginia, his sophomore season, unbelievable. The bat is clearly what the Cardinals see the most out of this guy. I'm just going to read you off his numbers, and I know collegiate numbers, you have to sort of take it with a grain of salt because you need to know a little bit more about a guy and about the way that he goes about collecting these statistics, but you can't tell me a guy hitting 449 in the Big 12 over 268 plate appearances. That's his batting average. He was batting 450, essentially, for his sophomore season at age 20, his age 20 season. On base more than half the time at 517, and he slugged 787. OPS of 1304, 16 homers in 268 plate appearances, 36 stolen bases, 8 times caught stealing, but 36 steals. I know it's a little bit different to steal bases in college or even at the lower levels of the minors compared to the bigs, but that just shows as an athletic profile, you can see a guy that's able to take 36 bags that's in 55 games. It's not, don't compare that to a major league season stolen base total. Guy did it in 55 games. He's an athlete and a gamer and a gritty guy, the way it seems, a ball player. Kind of guy that you feel like had some Cardinals-y qualities to him, which I think old school Cardinals fans like, and I think new school fans do too. How can you not like a guy that plays the game that way? Strikeout to walk ratio in 2023, this was his calling card season. We're going to talk about how 2024 was not quite up to the level that he had the year before. We'll talk about why that is and maybe the risks associated with it. But a 1304 OPS and had 26 walks to 22 strikeouts. If you take the 268 plate appearances and you double it, just for simplicity's sake, you get to about 520 or so right? 525, whatever that ends up being, plate appearances. And if you double the strikeout total to get to 44, that's about a big league plate appearance total that you might have as a mostly full-time player, and less than 50 strikeouts. I'm not saying it's just that simple. This is college baseball versus the highest level of the sport. But you like a guy with that kind of plate discipline and that ability to avoid the strikeout, which he did really successfully back in 2023. Now let's talk about the player, JJ Wetherholt, and how things have gone for him over the last year or so. The big news is blew out his hamstring, grade 3, significant strain on February 19th, like 4 games into his collegiate season. Summer before, he had a hamstring injury with Team USA. So last summer, 2023. So now I guess you could say kind of hamstrings more of a recurring thing for him, which maybe concerns you for a guy that's 21 years old, because hamstrings are annoying. But you know what? Sonny Gray has had recurring hamstring injuries, and you know what? You just deal with it when it comes, and you rehab it, and that's just a part of what it is. Sometimes, though, when guys have recurring injuries and you don't have to sign up to deal with that, a team might choose to not sign up to deal with that, right? But with JJ Wetherholt, I think there is so much upside here that unless that just becomes a major nuisance that he just can't ever stay on the field, I think this guy's going to be a big league player. In terms of the hit rate, I think the Cardinals got a guy that has been described as being above average at a lot of different things. Is he going to be a superstar in any one thing? That's obviously going to remain to be seen. He's not played a day of professional baseball yet. But the hit tool, I mean, for a Cardinal lineup that we're looking at right now going, man, it'd be nice to have 1 or 2 more guys. A couple years down the road, JJ Wetherholt could be maybe one of those type of guys that mixes in, and you're going to be really happy as a Cardinal fan every time he's coming up to the plate. I think there's a potential that the Cardinals got that type of guy today. Does he have a tool that's just, it's not that he's going to be a 40 home run guy. Like, he doesn't have the Jack Caglione power tool, right? But I think he's got a pretty good stick. I mean, he's got a good bat. But let's talk a little bit more about the hamstring stuff. The 19th of February, 4 games into the season, blew it out. Grade 3 strain. There was a story with The Athletic that's definitely worth checking out if you want to learn more about Wetherholt, the newest Cardinal, where the athletic trainer for the West Virginia Mountaineers basically said, coming out onto the field, I believe his name is Rozier. Let's see if I get this right. Yeah, Steven Rozier, feared initially that it was a much worse injury than blowing out a hammy. And he said in the article, I actually thought he'd blown out his knee. When I got to him on the field, I said, hey, what happened? And he said, my hamstring blew out. And I said, thank God. And he looked at me like, are you kidding me right now? But I was like, if you just saw what I saw, you would understand why I'm glad that that's all it is, that it just was a hamstring, not a knee injury, which is obviously a lot longer of a recovery time. It was not a season-ending knee injury, but a grade 3 hamstring strain, like, that's significant enough that you could see a guy junior year of college eligible for the MLB draft after that season, was hyped up as a high first-round pick already, and maybe he just packs it in. Maybe he does his rehab and doesn't go out and potentially risk having lesser collegiate numbers than the last time everybody saw him when he was setting records for West Virginia as a sophomore. But that isn't what JJ Wetherholt did. He wanted to get back out on the field. He wanted to battle with his brothers. He wanted to play for West Virginia. That was the university that believed in him, that gave him a shot, and he felt like it was just the only thing that he was going to do was to get back out there and play with his team, try to contribute to his college team. That's a gamer, man. And that's the kind of thing that you're not going to see on the back of the baseball card or the stat sheet, but I do think it is indicative of a pro-caliber mindset. Like, we're not speaking to something that tangibly happens on the field in terms of statistical, but it's just a mindset and the type of guy and player that you want. Like, if I'm drafting somebody, I want to know that kind of thing about him. He had a huge injury a couple games into the season, and instead of thinking, well, how is this going to affect my draft stock negatively if I go out there and maybe don't show my best and I'm not 100%, but I go back out there anyway and now people look at my stats differently, does it mess up my draft stock? Because if I just stay out and rehab and get healthy, I can probably still be a very high pick, and I don't have to deal with any of the risk associated with coming back as maybe not 100% myself. Let them just remember the last thing they saw, which was me setting records as a sophomore. That'll be good enough to get me into the pros with a very, very nice signing bonus, right? But it's not the way he approached it. And I don't think that's just bluster or blowing smoke. Like, we can always talk about the intangibles, and when we talk about draft kids, we always do. We focus on, oh, he's the greatest guy. You wouldn't believe it. Sometimes they're not the greatest guy. Sometimes they're not the greatest kid. And so I think that stuff matters. And I think what you're talking about is character. When you're staking a top 10 pick on a kid, you want someone of high character. And it seems as though Wetherholt approached this rehab and the way that he did it, to me, is extremely telling of this kid being a high character guy. Let me know in the comments, do you think I put too much stock into this aspect of it? Because if the dude can't play, then character is not going to be worth a damn. But the thing of it is, I think he can play, because you can look at his numbers from being a sophomore in college and hitting 449 for a full collegiate season, you know? So he ends up coming back. He plays shortstop as well. That's something that maybe does change his draft pedigree a little bit. And the Cardinals do say they're going to keep him on the left side of the infield to begin, and he's going to play shortstop, at least when he first gets going. And I didn't happen to hear from Randy Flores. I don't know if the question was asked, and I regretfully was not. I was in the Zoom, but I wasn't asking questions, frankly, because I was putting my son to bed, and I was like, I just need to record this thing. But if the timing works out that they bring Flo out right when I'm doing bedtime, then you know what? I'm going to prioritize bedtime, just to be honest with you guys. You guys listen to my podcast, you know that is what comes first and foremost to me is family. And this past week, there were a few times where I was not able to do it because I was covered the game Wednesday night. And I knew the draft was going on, but the timing of it just couldn't have been worse for that. If the Cardinals had been picking in the 20s like they normally are, it would have been totally fine. But anyway, I didn't ask the question, but I would like to know what level he's going to start at. I didn't hear it. Maybe I missed it. I listened back through the Zoom, and I don't believe I heard it asked of Randy Flores where they expect he's going to start, whether that's low A, high A, as low as rookie ball. I think low A you could probably get away with for Wetherholt just because he's 21 years old. He's a 3-year collegiate player. Does he really need rookie ball? But maybe just to get some eyes on him and get him integrated, they might send him down there for a couple weeks before going to low A. If I had to guess, it's going to be one or the other. It's going to be right to low A, or it's going to be summer league, rookie ball, little bit of integration for literally just a handful of games, 5 to 7 to 10 games, and then, on to Palm Beach from there. But I'll be curious to see how the Cardinals want to approach it, because it does seem as though this guy could be a fast riser. However, let's get into maybe where a little bit of the concerns come in. The thing that you thought could happen if you come back too quickly from an injury. Well, it happened. His numbers were not quite as robust as a junior as they were when he was lighting the world on fire as a sophomore. 36 games played instead of 55, so he missed maybe not as many games as you might have otherwise thought for a grade 3 strain, but attacked the hell out of his rehab, got back relatively quickly, was DHing at times as well. There was a comment made in the Zoom or somewhere that I heard this, that he was at times, or that there was at least one case of on a home run ball, he basically didn't even do the trot because he wanted to conserve whatever he had at that point in the hamstring or the injury that he was kind of nursing back to full go, but ended up playing shortstop. So obviously, I would think the hamstring is in a good place. He said it was in a good place when he was asked about it tonight. So I don't know how much of a deterrent that's really going to be as far as his placement and getting him going later on this summer. It's not like a pitcher where you're thinking about got to limit their innings because they went deep into the College World Series or something. Get Wetherholt out there and, monitor and understand that you don't want to have any sort of setback with the hammy. But there's something that happened in February, and he played a college season after that. So I think it should be full steam ahead, and the Cardinals will get their hands on him and figure out where he ends up going. But the numbers were lesser. That's the part that I do just want to give you the numbers. They're still good, but they're not hitting 449. He went from hitting 449 as a sophomore to 331 over 164 plate appearances as a junior. But the on-base percentage only goes from 517 to 472 because he took 30 walks instead of 26 walks. He took 4 additional walks in 104 fewer plate appearances. So the stuff that I think is tangible that's going to matter, like your plate discipline and your batting eye and all of those like that's going to come into play via the walk total, and the fact that that walk rate actually went up, spiked rather considerably, is interesting to me. Strikeout rate, still very, very low. Had 17 strikeouts in 164 plate appearances. Maybe that's a tinge higher than he was the previous year, but that's still a very good mark. You're talking about a guy that if he played 600 PAs would be striking out, 50, 60, 70 times. Just really, really solid strikeout numbers to give an idea of the type of tool that he has at the plate to be able to hang in there and hit the ball and stay alive. Just doesn't strike out. It's a great characteristic to have. And not every high-profile collegiate player that you're going to draft you're going to be able to say that about. There are going to be guys where, yeah, he's got incredible power, but, he also swings and misses a lot. And if he's swinging and missing a lot at the collegiate level, what does that say about his ability to adapt when guys are really pitching him tough in the pro ball? That's just an obvious thing that's, the Cardinals aren't going to have to deal with Wetherholt because he isn't that type of player. I think he's a very complete hitter from everything that we can understand about him. But the numbers were down. The power was down as well. 8 home runs still in 164 plate appearances. Lower home run rate than he had certainly the season before. But OPS still over 1,000. 1061 OPS compared to 1304. So still very good numbers, just not the otherworldly numbers that he had in 2023. But that's coming off a rather significant grade 3 hamstring strain. And the guy says, no, I'm not packing it in. I'm going to go out to play, and whatever it says about my draft stock is what it's going to be. But I'm not going to. I'm going to be loyal to the team that I'm on. I think there's value in that. He's a gamer, gritty guy. I got to be honest with you. I'll go ahead and give you the player comp now. To me, he sounds like everything that I'm reading about him, that I hear about him. Obviously, it's not like I spent the whole year watching West Virginia baseball. But to me, the comp that I would draw of a Cardinal, and it's actually a current Cardinal, he sounds like Brendan Donovan, but with more hype. If Brendan Donovan had first-round prospect hype, I think that is the way that we would have talked about Brendan Donovan on his way up, based on what we now see from Brendan Donovan at the big league level. Can play a little bit of anywhere. I don't know that Wetherholt would play the outfield, but Donovan's just that much of a gamer and that much of an athlete to just be able to pick it up and do it and be elite at it. And obviously, Brendan Donovan is a guy that we really, really like the hit tool. We like what he does offensively. And he takes a good AB every single time. He's going to strike out some, but Donnie doesn't strike out very much. He's 53 strikeouts on the season in 397 plate appearances. So that's what we're talking about with Donnie as well. He also had 53 strikeouts last year. So he's matched his total from a year ago. But remember, he missed a bulk of the season with the surgery that he had toward the end. He just kind of shut it down eventually. They were trying to DH him for a while, but once it was clear the Cardinals were out of it, he had his surgery, and it was with an eye on making sure he could make it back for the season. He made it back. Tommy Edman, we're still waiting to see. But 53 strikeouts for Donovan in 397 PAs. Last year he took 371 PAs, so even a little bit better of a strikeout rate this year for Donnie. That's kind of the way I think about it. And does that mean that Wetherholt's just, he's going to be a 772 OPS? That's what Donovan has for his career and over 1,200 plate appearances. That's really good, though. That's a big league player who's above average at a little bit of everything that he does. All the gamer elements. I just think Wetherholt and Donovan, when they get together, I think those would be two guys who kind of hit it off. I think they feel like they're pretty comparable. And by the way, I should have mentioned this before. I haven't said anything about the size or the build or the makeup of JJ Wetherholt. He's not a big guy. And that's another reason that the Donovan comparison strikes, because I think Donnie's like, 5'10", 5'11". I'm seeing on Baseball Reference 6'1" for Donnie. Not really. I'm going to say probably I'd take the under on that, maybe, but that's fine. I mean, he's doesn't need to be any bigger than he is to be great at what he is. So I think there's a comparison to be made there. Wetherholt is listed at 5'10", 190. Donovan listed at 6'1", 210. I think 6'1's a little hefty. I'm gonna probably take the under on that. And I don't know what Donovan weighs. He's built, so there's no doubt about that. He could certainly weigh 200 or close to 210. I just don't think he's quite 6'1. But who cares? I'm focusing too much on that. Wetherholt, 5'10", 190 is what he's listed at, and he is a left-handed batter. So that's maybe the one element of this, like if you are looking at the big league club right now, you're thinking, Another left-handed batter who plays second base? Are you joking? Because the Cardinals have a lot of those. Gorman, Donovan, Tommy Edman, if he comes back, is somebody who kind of fits that category anyway. But I think if you're the Cardinals, it's like you're not thinking about, well, what do we do if we're too left-handed heavy? Figure that out down the road, and hopefully they have a front office by then that's a little more nimble at being able to kind of parse some of this out, because anytime the Cardinals have had gluts under John Mozeliak, it has not really been a priority to, or at least maybe it's a priority, but they just have not been able to effectively do it, to fix it, and to get fair value in a trade for one of the guys that represents the glut and be able to flip it for something that you do need or you don't have enough of. That's not really been historically a strength of John Mozeliak's front office, in my opinion, in recent years, because there have been times where it's obvious, like, okay, too many left-handed hitting outfielders, or you have too many of this, too many second basemen, and it never really, the can just kind of gets kicked down the road, and the Cardinals get bailed out a little bit by the fact that, like, okay, Brendan Donovan fits into that category, but he's awesome and can play anywhere, and so now he's your left fielder, and suddenly, like, the glut is not the same as it felt the year before, that sort of thing. But diving back into my notes here on Wetherholt, he said tonight, he did a Zoom as well with the media, and said, has mostly been a second baseman, played shortstop last year. Cardinals are going to start him out at shortstop this year, and I think that's great. Flores, as I kind of alluded to this earlier, but Flo said playing shortstop in college, sign of athleticism, and I just want to reiterate, don't view keeping him at shortstop for now as it's anything to do with Mason Wynn. Mason is not relevant to how they're going to handle this kid positionally in 2024. If you're already thinking about trades or what it says about the roster that they took him in the first place and basing it on position, I think you miss the way that the draft works, because it's apples and oranges. I want to cut off that at the pass. I just think that you take the best player available, and that's what he was at that point. But diving back into my notes here on Wetherholt, he said tonight, he did a Zoom as well with the media, and said, has mostly been a second baseman, played shortstop last year. Cardinals are going to start him out at shortstop this year, and I think that's great. Flores, as I kind of alluded to this earlier, but Flo said playing shortstop in college, sign of athleticism, and I just want to reiterate, don't view keeping him at shortstop for now as it's anything to do with Mason Wynn. Mason is not relevant to how they're going to handle this kid positionally in 2024. If you're already thinking about trades or what it says about the roster that they took him in the first place and basing it on position, I think you miss the way that the draft works, because it's apples and oranges. I want to cut off that at the pass. I just think that you take the best player available, and that's what he was at that point. In their heart of hearts, were they hoping to see Hagen Smith fall? Maybe, but we'll never know. They'll never publicly admit what they were looking at, because I think they are genuinely really happy to have Wetherholt drop to them the way that he did. And if Wetherholt plays second base, it doesn't mean they're going to trade Donovan, or they're not going to trade Gorman, or they're going to trade, could they trade Arenado and move Wetherholt to third? Like, I don't think I think it's too early. Anytime a collegiate player is drafted, this guy's going to go to low A, right? Maybe high A at best at first. So it's not what it says about the big league roster. It's just too early to make those types of thoughts. I understand the passion from fans to want to connect those dots. They're not there to be connected yet. You have to wait and see if the guy's gonna hit the way they hope and gonna be viable the way they hope. And then down the road, sure, 2-3 years from now, that could very well be a thing, that if you add another guy to that mix who has a similar skill set to some other players, and by then I think Tommy Edman will be in a different organization. But if that's the case, then the Cardinals will cross that bridge when they get to it. But for right now, I think it's just a little bit early to be drawing up trade proposals and saying, well, because they took this kid, obviously that means they're going to trade Gorman. Doesn't mean that at all. They could trade Gorman, but it would be independent of the decision to draft the player that they drafted tonight, JJ Wetherholt, at number 7 overall. So what kind of player is he? Above average in so many areas, and he can hit. That's the top tool. He can run, as we talked about with the stolen bases, and moves around defensively, I think, as a result of his athleticism. But let's read about or hear about some of what was being said about him coming in. This is from The Athletic. At 5'10", 100, and they said 180 pounds. He's listed at 190 on Baseball Reference. So you heard that little noise in the background. Ignore that. That's my Control F at work. 5'10", 180 is, so he's not a big guy. And it was funny to hear read in the article that he basically said sometimes people will meet him, and it was at the combine. They do the combine before the draft. One player was shocked when they met him and realized that his hitting numbers were being generated from a smaller frame, because you could look at the guy's numbers and know, oh, I'm meeting JJ Wetherholt. I know that dude's a stud. Oh, you're JJ Wetherholt. Okay, I've seen your numbers, but I didn't really, maybe thought you'd be a little taller. And he said, I was like, yeah, dude, I don't look crazy, but I can swing a little bit, he said with a laugh. So it seems like he's got a good sense of humor. Not surprisingly, he said Jose Altuve, Dustin Pedroia, two players that he admires the most. So that kind of tracks, right? And I think, again, I'm going to take the under on Brendan Donovan being 6'1". I think Brendan Donovan is sort of in that ilk as well, of a guy plays the game with a purpose and maybe with a little something to prove, a little bit of an edge, because you don't have to be the biggest guy, but you can have heart, you can have intensity, you can have integrity, and you can have a lot of things that can propel you at the big league level. And I think Brendan Donovan, a lot of that is applicable to him. But from this story as well, he may be the best pure bat in the 2024 class, is what was written here, even though he doesn't maybe look it physically like an offensive force. Keith Law said that Wetherholt, quote, might have the best swing for contact in the draft class and can, quote, really, really hit. So they got a hitter. That's what you should want. He has an elite chase percentage, 14.1% this season, made contact on nearly 85% of pitches. This is still coming from The Athletic. 85% of pitches that he swung at. And it was quality contact, as his 90th percentile exit velo was 108.2 miles per hour this season. And remember, that's with an aluminum bat, but still. All of those numbers were improvements over his sophomore season, despite missing the time with injury. So he improved in some of the areas of the game that I think happens between the years in a lot of ways. Chase percentage and like exit velocity is something that is very much a physical aspect of it. So he was the good contact that he was making was with exit velo. And that's an improvement over what he was during his sophomore year when he was unbelievable. So the fact that those strides were being made from sophomore to junior when you had this significant injury and time missed in the middle of it all, I think is notable. 145 games at West Virginia. Per The Athletic, he struck out 82 times and walked 82 times. That's a nice sign. Over his last two seasons, a 56-39 walk-to-strikeout ratio. Most guys don't have a walk-to-strikeout. They have a strikeout-to-walk, right? He walks more than he strikes out over the last couple of seasons, sophomore and junior. So kind of circling the drain a little bit about the general thought of this player. How I view it is he fell into their laps, and outside of getting Burns or Smith, which feels like, yeah, bigger need for the current roster than maybe another guy who's probably a future second baseman or a guy that is a utility guy if he's going to move around. But short of being able to get one of those guys, which was not an option, and I don't know if they would have preferred it, we never will. But short of that, this was perhaps the best case scenario if you're interested in just stacking high-quality players and dudes into the organization, and somebody that I think has a very, very strong chance of being a pro. Like, you draft a guy in the first round, you really hope he's going to get to the big leagues. I think this guy unequivocally gets to the big leagues. The only way he doesn't is if injuries derail. And that could happen to anybody. So just because he's had a couple of hamstring injuries, does that drop him from 1 to 7? If he was in mock drafts a consensus guy to be going toward the top, who knows? But I think the Cardinals got a really good one. And it's easier to understand. You could think like, well, how could the guy drop from 1 to 7? Well, I think the guy drafted at number 1, Bazana, kind of profiles maybe a little bit similarly to what you have positionally to Wetherholt. And he's a guy, I think he's the first primary second baseman to be drafted number 1 overall ever. So Wetherholt played short this year, but if he profiles more as a second baseman, you could understand why the Guardians might have been deciding between him and Wetherholt, if that's what they were looking for. Now, again, you don't draft a position. You shouldn't. You draft best player available. But if they were looking for a type, those guys are kind of similar archetypes, right? The teams that wanted pitcher, Reds, White Sox, clearly wanted starting pitcher. They got 2 very good ones, we think. Okay, that's 3 of the first 5 picks. Charlie Condon was going to go because I think he was just consensus to be top 3, top 5. He goes to the Colorado Rockies. Nobody's really surprised by that. And then the other one was Caglione. And I think if you're the Royals, you're looking at it and going, what's the upside play for just pure power potential? It's Caglione over Wetherholt. So it's not that he was just the 7th best player and dropped from 1 to 7 because he wasn't as good as the guys going in front of him. It's all based on various factors that go into it of what a team might have been looking for at that given time. And I think he fits the Cardinals, man. He fits the archetype of what a Cardinal is. And I think that's a good thing. I say that in a positive way. You collect enough guys like this, like Brendan Donovan, you're going to win a lot of games. I've said before, I think with 9 Brendan Donovans, or I guess 8 Brendan Donovans in the field, and then he can DH for me as well, get me a pitching staff, and I'll go at you with 9 Brendan Donovans, and I think I'll win. I think I'll win a lot of baseball games because the dude is just a baseball player. And he could also play probably all 9 positions. I might need my catching version of Brendan Donovan to have a few years practicing the position first, but I've got no doubt in my mind that Brendan Donovan, if they told him he had to be a catcher, I think he could probably figure out over the matter of a couple of years. There'd be some things he'd have to learn, but that's the type of guy that I want on my team as many times as I can have him, and maybe the Cardinals just drafted another one in JJ Wetherholt. And I say that as the highest form of a compliment, as I tweeted out on Sunday night. I think that's a compliment to be saying that. So one more little quote on Wetherholt from the trainer at West Virginia. He said that by the time we hit the last weekend of the year in the Big 12 tournament, he was playing free and he wasn't thinking about the hamstring anymore. He was moving and running around at full speed. I can't say enough good things about the way that he handled the whole process. It was really impressive. That's Stephen Rozier of West Virginia. He's the associate athletic director of athletic training, so he's the trainer basically, and said by the end of the year he was good to go and was playing at 100%, running at 100%, which means that before that he wasn't, right? And so some of those numbers could be compromised in that regard. That's the type of pick that I want. I'll take a guy there's a reason that he might fall a little bit to you, and it's not indicative of the kind of player that he's going to be for you in the future. That season's already happened. Any punishment that you want to dole out for a guy only hitting 330 when he used to hit 440 is irrelevant. It's not going to come into play for anybody because it's over. And I think he's going to be more like the guy that he was in terms of the production and the numbers. Pure batting average, pure hitter, pure contact guy, going to hit for some power, going to hit the ball hard, which is something that he did as a junior. Like, I'm not going to hold the numbers against him. I feel like the Cardinals just benefit from it, frankly, because I don't think he drops to 7 if he doesn't injure the hamstring. And do I think the hamstring is going to be a long-term concern? Even though it's a recurring thing at this point, I'm going to say probably not. I'm going to say the Cardinals are going to come up with a plan in the same way that Sonny Gray at 30 whatever years old has had to figure out, he's 34 years old, has had hamstrings sometimes, and yet it doesn't derail his career. So I feel like Wetherholt is a slam dunk. He's 21. He'll turn 22 in September. Was born September 10th, 2002. Yep, that's the world we live in now, folks. All the guys getting drafted are 2000s babies, and that's just the way that it is. But what do you think, Cardinals fans? JJ Wetherholt, man, I think it's a nice move for the Cardinals that they didn't really have to do much to make it happen. It fell their way, and they just pressed the big, obvious neon button and said, yep, we'll do that. Because I think by the time it came their turn to pick, he was the obvious pick. If you're the St. Louis Cardinals, he was the pick you make at that point. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me know yours. Cardinals fans, are you excited? And do you think that there's a chance they got the best player in the draft at number 7 overall? Because I definitely do think that. I don't think he's got the highest upside. I think he's got the highest floor, maybe, of any of these guys. And then that upside is going to be inherent because you might have got another Brendan Donovan type who has now prospect hype attached. Donnie was drafted in, I think, the 7th round out of South Alabama. This guy's drafted 7th overall. So it's not to say he's going to be a better player than Brendan Donovan, but there's hype around this kid and consensus reason to believe that he could be a stud. I don't know what the great area is going to be for him. If I had to pick out an ideal way that he develops and turns in a batting line, like it's a guy that could flirt with hitting 300 with the way that they talk about his contact. He's not going to strike out much. Don't know how many walks he'll take, but I think he'll walk a fair bit. If he's a 300, 360, 370 on base type of guy, and then what's the power going to look like? Could he hit a bunch of doubles and run into 15, 20 home runs in a year in the same way that I think Brendan Donovan can? Could that be a guy who, is going to slug 450, 460, which if you add that up to what I said about the potential on base, is he a 810, 820 OPS guy? That's a perennial, really freaking good player. I don't know if that's a guy that makes all-star teams, but it's a guy that, like I think you could see from Brendan Donovan, who has a career OPS of 772. I think Brendan Donovan could be a guy that at the end of the day, for his career, maybe OPS is closer to 780, 790, 800, because I think he's still maybe in the process of showing the best that he's got the ability to bring to the table. And this kid Wetherholt might be even better, right? I'm not going to say he's better than Brendan Donovan because today he's got a lot of learning to do. Donovan's 6 years further along in his life and his career, and Wetherholt's going to have to prove all of the things that Donovan has already shown. But I think the archetype is where I like to draw the comparison, and the fact that this kid's got the prospect type that he does should make a lot of Cardinals fans pretty excited in my estimation. But that's all I have on the draft. Let me know your thoughts, and let's go ahead and get into Down on the Farm before we leave for this episode of the podcast. It's time to go Down on the Farm. So even though the big league teams are at the All-Star break right now, the minors are still in full swing at the moment. So we'll talk about the Memphis Redbirds and Springfield Cardinals from today, and I'll make my commentary about the Orioles in the way that I think they just probably should win the World Series this year. Because at their AAA team right now, and the Cardinals affiliate Memphis Redbirds actually beat them today 8-5, knocking off the Norfolk Tides. But with the Tides, you have Jackson Holliday leading off as the DH. He goes 3 for 5 today, has a .913 OPS down in AAA. Connor Norby is their second baseman today. He's another big prospect, .910 OPS. You got Kobe Mayo, .983 OPS. I mean, this lineup is just riddled with dudes who are going to be dudes at the next level eventually. So if there's a need at all that the Norfolk Tides, or not the Tides, but the Orioles possess, they can draw from the Tides and make a trade to fill that need. Now, they don't want to trade any of these guys, but they just keep collecting these white, blonde position player studs, like the jokes on Twitter make themselves about how all these guys look the exact same. But they've got more of them than they need, and so you'd think if they're going to maybe end up looking for some pitching. There was actually an article recently that I saw posted on Twitter by a Pittsburgh writer who said the Orioles were interested in trading Jackson Holliday for Jared Jones, the breakout starter for the Pirates, before the season, or maybe even during the season, at some point during the 2024 season, I think, because Jones was maybe not known as well outside of fantasy baseball circles until he started to do the darn thing this year, and then when he did, apparently that was something that was being considered. As we know that Jackson Holliday didn't start so hot for the Orioles. He went back down to AAA. He's doing well down there with a .913 OPS, but that's interesting that they were considering even maybe trading Jackson Holliday to get a young, controllable starter, obviously. And it was actually the Pirates, according to this report, that balked eventually at the idea of moving ahead with this trade conversation. I want to find the Dejan Kovacevic, I believe is the man's name, who is a columnist covering those Pittsburgh teams out in Pittsburgh way for a local website. But that's interesting to think about in terms of what the Pirates value and maybe what the Orioles could be looking to do with some of these young players. Try to trade a position player for a pitcher, because I think that would be the thing that could balance them out a little bit more so. But anyway, Redbirds, 8-5 win over those Norfolk Tides. And the big star of the game offensively for the Redbirds was Thomas DeJacy, which is good to see because he's kind of been a little underwhelming this year in terms of the numbers. But after 2 home runs today, that's right, 2 bombs, 3 RBIs, and also reached on a walk, he's up to a .720 OPS on the season. So that's kind of fun to see from DeJacy. Graceffo pitched 3 innings, gave up 3 runs, whatever. Granillo back into the good graces after getting blown up the other day. 2 1/3 scoreless innings with a couple of strikeouts, and Ryan Ludus got his 9th save of the season for the Memphis Redbirds. So that's what's going on down there in AAA. Does not appear to me that Ivan Herrera was in the lineup today. Collins was catching, so I figure Herrera should probably be catching as often as possible down there in order to get the throwing arm, just get the reps of trying to throw out base runners. But we'll see what ends up happening as far as that's concerned. Springfield Cardinals had a nice day offensively. 16-9, they beat the Wichita Wind Surge, which is a really fun minor league team name. I think I need a hat. I would have to imagine that the Wichita Wind Surge have some pretty good gear. They have like a flying Pegasus horse as part of their logo. I need a lid from the Wind Surge, I reckon. But they lost today, 16-9 to the Springfield Cards. Tommy Edman back in the lineup. DHing again, DEFCON 2, 2.5 maybe, but it's in that range because I want to see him play the field. But at least he's in there. He took 5 ABs, so that's good. Had success, 2 for 5, 3 RBIs, scored a run. up to a 286 batting mark down there with Springfield Cardinals so far. Low OPS. I think he's only hit singles. No real power just yet. 639 OPS is what they say according to this little blurb here on MLB.com or MILB.com, MILB.com. Yeah, I guess he's not really hitting for much power. It's surprising to see a 286 average with that low of an OPS, but he's also he's slugging 286 as well. On base percentage of 353. So he's making his way just fine at the plate. Just need to see him play defensively. What's he going to look like in the outfield? What's he going to look like at shortstop, second base? That's the next step. I think they're maybe being a little careful with the ankle still. Remember, that was something that happened when he was fielding grounders a week and a half ago or so. So maybe that's still part of the reason there. But, I mean, if he's hitting well, that's really the main thing as far as the wristal aspect of this. I know wristal, probably not a word, but I think as far as his wrist is concerned, I wanted to know what would happen with swinging the bat and then being able to bounce back and do it again the next day. So we'll continue to monitor what's going on there for Tommy Edman, but it was good to see him have a nice day. And several other guys did too. Our guy Jimmy Crooks, 2 for 5, couple of runs scored, also reached via walk, had an RBI, and he homered. So good to see he's got an 882 OPS. Not a ton of other hitting prospects at this point, I think, at AAA that you're maybe going to see long run for the Cardinals, but Crooks is somebody still to keep an eye on. But that is going to do it for Down on the Farm and for this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. I hope you guys appreciated the little bit of a different way of going about the podcast tonight. I just didn't want to talk about that game. It was gnarly. And there's going to be no games for a while, so we don't want to linger on that being the game. Content will still come this week. I am going to be going on vacation as of Wednesday, and I'll be out of commission a little bit in terms of, like, I'm not going to be doing the radio show Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you listen to that, don't expect to hear me then. Cardinals play the Braves over the weekend. I'll be watching and I'll be podcasting when the games start back up. And I'm bringing my equipment on this trip to Florida. So if there's any podcast idea, even if it's just like, hey, do a 20-minute video about XYZ, this would be the time to shoot me a DM or check out the Discord and message me there, or you can comment it below on YouTube and tell me, hey, do this while you're on your trip. I'm going to be having a few drinkies and getting some sun, but I will want to continue to post because we call it B-Schaeff Daily for a reason. So I hope y'all are ready for the little bit of a break, ready for the All-Star game, Home Run Derby, who you got Monday night. But that's going to do it for now, and just stay tuned. But you guys, you guide me for the next 3 days until the Cardinals return. And, one of those days we could talk All-Star game. But let me know what kind of content you want to see because I want to continue to post it if you guys want to continue to listen to it. All right, that'll do it for this one. We'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.